To kick off the holiday season, we're going to be watching Christmas Evil. It's baffling that this movie isn't more popular, because it is truly something special. It is a slasher movie that was released in 1980, one of the many holiday-themed slashers that came around that time, and one that probably leans the heaviest on trying to catch steam off of Halloween with its marketing. The tagline for this movie was "The Night He Dropped In," so I guess subtlety wasn't their biggest concern. Despite that, this movie isn't a knockoff. It is pretty original and entertaining, and has an interesting cast. So let's get into it. The movie opens with a narrator reciting The Night Before Christmas,
and all through the house,
as two kids and their mom watch Santa come down the chimney and go ham on some cookies. He does his thing and gives the kids a wink before bouncing. Later, as the kids speculate on if it was their dad or not, one decides to sneak down for another look. He comes upon his mom and Santa about to do some freaky shit, and that, I guess, is all it takes to traumatize him for the rest of his life. He bolts upstairs and smashes a snow globe as PTSD sets in, and uses a shard of the glass to cut his hand, showing us that he is now batshit crazy. Cut the title card and the present. Get it? We see this kid 30 years later, Harry, who oddly enough is played by Brandon Maggart, who is Fiona Apple's dad in real life. He is all grown up and very much into the Christmas spirit, maybe a little too much. We see that he likes to dress as Santa and also creepily watch neighborhood kids to see if they're being naughty or nice.
Good boy, Scotty.
When he spots something that he doesn't like, it's a cutout of a naked girl, by the way, he runs to his list and checks it twice. We then cut to his job at a toy factory, where we see he's a foreman and gets bullied by his coworkers on the reg, most notably by this guy named Frank, who corners him into taking his shift.
I get that schmuck Harry working for me tonight.
Basically, we see this sort of setup for a while. The gist of it is that this guy gets shit on constantly, and is still extremely messed up from what happened to him as a kid, and we see him creeping on people and pretty quickly breaking down mentally. One of the families he was creeping on turns out to be his brother's Phil, who is actually played by Jeffrey DeMunn, who you may know from The Walking Dead. Anyway, Harry cancels his plans for Thanksgiving dinner with his brother and makes himself a Santa Claus suit and paints a creepy van up like a sleigh while he recites local kids' names from his list by heart.
Mickey Cooper. Oh, the carved dog. John Wesley.
One kid in particular, the one from earlier with the nudie magazine, we find out is Moss Garcia.
Moss Garcia.
And Harry fucking hates Moss Garcia.
Moss Garcia.
He goes out that night to Moss Garcia's house and, does this for some reason. He gets spotted by Moss Garcia on his way out as he hides in a bush and scares the crap out of him, causing Mama Garcia to slap the taste out of his mouth. From there we see more general spooky stuff, like his creepy toy shop and this. And also more of Harry's creepy relationship with the neighborhood kids.
I wish I was principal so I could throw whoever I wanted out of school. And I wish I was a firefighter, dive bomber, and think of projects. Boom!
Great, great!
I wish I had a lifetime subscription to Penthouse magazine.
Moss Garcia.
Fucking Moss Garcia. And his arc of finally reaching a breaking point where he just kind of doesn't care anymore.
I found him. I can play the tune.
I'll tell you, Harry, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
And seemingly has other plans. He has a conversation with his corrupt bosses, and that seems to be the final straw. Harry steals some toys from the factory, collects some dirt, and permanently applies his Santa beard with some super glue. Now, this is about the middle of the movie. Up to now, this movie has been a pretty decent character study, I've kind of brushed over it, but I actually suggest watching it for yourself. But it is at this point that the whole film takes a pretty sharp tonal shift. Cut to Christmas Eve night. Harry has completely succumbed to his delusions. He begins breaking into local houses and leaving toys for the good children and a bag of dirt for Moss Garcia. He then heads off to the local children's hospital and, after facing arguably warranted suspicion, leaves a truckload of the stolen toys for the kids and goes off into the night.
Merry Christmas, everyone! Merry Christmas, Santa Claus!
He stops at a church where one of his crappy bosses from before is, and while looking for him in the crowd, starts getting harassed out of nowhere by these random British dudes.
I see you've given up your reindeer for more modern wheels.
He stabs one in the eye with a toy soldier and hacks the other and his girlfriend down with a very festive axe, and then he's off again. Next, he stops by an office Christmas party to lurk around and gets dragged in by two drunk guys, one of which is Hector Salamanca from Breaking Bad. About to go on the offensive, he realizes these people are probably the first in the whole movie who are actually being decent to him, so he chills out and breaks out his bag of toys for some kids who are for some unknown reason hanging out at an office party full of drunk adults. He gives them a speech that takes a turn and makes everyone uncomfortable.
But if you're bad boys and girls, I'll bring you something horrible.
And then he's off again.
Now Dasher! Now Dancer! Now Prancer and Vixen!
Off, in fact, to visit his nemesis from work, Frank. He decides to try to go down the chimney and gets hit with reality when he gets stuck. Honestly, if the movie had ended right here with him stuck there all night and getting picked up by the police the next morning or just freezing to death, I might have decided that this is the best movie ever. But he manages to get out and rolls off the chimney in probably the most realistic and hilarious portrayal of what would actually happen in a dumb movie scenario like this. After a moment of pure disappointment at his failure, he looks for another way in and eventually finds a good window. He gets in and stalks through the house like a bona fide ninja, leaves some presents for the kiddos, and then tries to suffocate Frank with his sack of presents. But it has taken too long, and so he eventually opts to grab a tree topper and slice his throat to avoid waking the missus. That doesn't work out very well, and he runs out, traumatizing this lady and her children for the rest of their lives. What a vicious circle he is creating. Cut to Christmas Day. Harry's brother sulks over him not showing up for Christmas. He talks trash about Harry and his wife defends him, and they catch a news bulletin on the recent string of murders. After some more Harry bashing, we cut to Harry, who took a little nappy time in his van. He calls his brother and gives him a cryptic confession, and off he goes.
I finally found the right notes. I can play the tune now.
One car wreck later, and he stumbles into a fancy-looking street where he is bombarded by children. He hands out presents while creepily eyeing the parents until one has enough and pulls a switchblade. The kids try to defend Santa, and one gets a hold of the knife and hands it to Harry before he runs off. Naturally, from there, the neighborhood forms a good old-fashioned lynch mob, and the chase is on. He makes it to his van and takes off to the last place he has left to go, his brother's house. After an argument where they basically unload their entire childhood onto each other, Phil is overcome with rage and starts to strangle Harry while his wife watches in horror. In a panic, he drags his brother's lifeless corpse out into the street and into his van. Harry isn't dead though, and he pops up and sucker punches his brother. Taking off, he finds that he's stuck between Phil and the angry mob, and he does the only thing he can do at this point. Drives off an embankment. And in the most unbelievable, unexpected turn I may have ever seen, his van does not plummet. Rather, as if through some Christmas miracle, his van flies off into the horizon. He has truly become Santa Claus. And yes, I realize this is probably Harry's last-ditch delusion, as he does in fact plummet to his death, but it is still a pretty amazing ending either way. If I had to rate this movie, I'd probably actually give it an 8 out of 10. It was marketed as a slasher, which I actually think hurt its exposure maybe, because underneath the odd campy tone, the first half of this movie is more of a character study, and a pretty good one at that. You sincerely start to feel bad for Harry and want to see him win, even though you know he's going to do some weird fucked up shit before it's over. But it makes you question that for a moment, and when it finally gets to that weird shit, your anticipation is built up, and the movie just kind of dumps it on you, and everything goes crazy. Several times in this movie, my expectations were subverted in such monumental ways that I probably won't ever forget this movie. It hits a really unique sweet spot where it's hard to tell if this movie is bad or secretly genius, and at the end of the day, I think it's a little bit of both. If you haven't seen it, even after watching this recap, I highly suggest giving it a shot, but let me know in the comments if you agree. Thanks for watching and subscribing, and until next time,